What's up? A common question that's asked by any musician really is, how do I know what scale to solo over what chord progression? And then there's the follow-up question, how do I ensure that it sounds good? Now, I was asked this question directly via email. If you have any questions like this, please leave a comment. And if I don't get back to you there, then please send me an email, because the emails I definitely get. The comments, sometimes I miss them. In this video, I'm going to give you multiple ways to answer that question, no matter what your level of ability. Now, I highly recommend watching this video all the way to the end, because each step gets more and more complicated. But even if you don't understand a certain part, being exposed to that idea will make it easier when you revisit it in the future. It will also open your mind to different ways to approach the more simple stuff. So I really recommend just pushing all the way through, even if you don't understand, and then coming back to it sometime in the future when you feel you need more information. And finally, before we get into it, if you learn anything in this video, please give me a like, please give me a subscribe. When I get those stats, it lets me know that I'm on the right path to teaching you what you want to know. So the very first thing we need to do when we're learning how to improvise over a song is figure out what key the song's in. Now, this can be done pretty easily. Most songs don't change that much. If the chord starts on A and ends on A, the song is probably in A. If the song's happy, you're pretty safe to play in A major. If the song's sad, you're pretty safe to play in A minor. And if you can play the whole song just fiddling around with A in that idea and it mostly sounds pretty good, then you're very safe to assume that the song is in A. If you've got the chord chart in front of you, it's going to tell you it's probably the chord that shows up most common during the song. So the song we're going to be playing today is in A minor, okay? The chords are A, C, and E minor. Now, because this is so straightforward, the first thing I'm going to do is the most obvious thing. I'm going to play A minor pentatonic over the top of it. Now, people tend to think that pentatonic is boring or easy, and once they've learnt it, they just stop. Right? Pentatonic is an incredibly powerful tool. I still use it every single time I play, and every single melody is built off it. So if you feel like pentatonic is boring, but you don't know what else to use, it means you don't know how to use pentatonic. You're better off sticking with pentatonic and having a play. Here's an example. There are many ways to make this more interesting. That was pretty straightforward. I was only using 5 notes in one position on the guitar. It's simple. There are very simple things that you can do to make this a lot more complicated and draw this from being a one position static thing to something that encompasses the entire fretboard. So the first question I've got is, if you know your pentatonic, do you know every position over the fretboard? Congratulations if that's the case, because then you know the entire fretboard. Next is, do you know a few safe notes that you can use that help embellish this, make it more interesting, make it something different? For example, the blues scale or the hexatonic scale, all are the pentatonic scale with one more note added in, right? If you get familiar with a couple of these ideas and then apply them to every position over the fretboard, you're gonna have a really effective toolkit to be able to solo in any key. Here is an example of me playing the blues scale in multiple positions. Remember, this is one extra note than the previous example, and I'm playing it over every octave that I can on the fretboard. And now we're going to make things a little bit more complicated by being selective about the notes that we choose. The first chord, A minor, has the notes A, C, and E. The second chord, C, has the notes C, E, and G. And the third chord, E minor, has the notes E, G, and B. If we take out all the repeated notes, we're left with A, B, C, E, and G. With this means that we can use any scale that contains those notes and it will sound good. With our solo, we are creating the harmony to lead our listener into the different fields. So we can play around with whatever we want, so long as we don't mess with those fundamental notes that are in the chords. Now, without getting into abstract territory, there are so many different scales that could have these notes. I'm going to keep it simple and nail it down to 2 scales that we can use, which the first one is A minor, the second one is A Dorian. This next example is in A minor to give you an idea of how playing a whole scale can change things around. Now let's change it up a bit. The first thing I'm going to do is change the E minor to an E major. This change of one note, which is moving the G in E to G sharp, creates a lot more harmonic movement, okay? It's incredibly common throughout music, and it's really something worth mentioning in this video because you will often come across this type of idea. This gives us the notes A, B, C, E, G natural, and G sharp. The G natural belongs to the C major chord, and the G sharp belongs to the E major chord. So some of you may have noticed that we've got an interesting conundrum here, which brings up two things that could either be viewed as problems or opportunities. So first, is that G sharp does not belong in A minor. So all of a sudden we can't use the A minor scale over this chord progression anymore. But not only that, we've got a stepwise progression. So we go semitones playing G, G sharp, and A. And all that means is that we've got some things to play with. Now for this example, we've got choices. We're not locked into a basic scale. We can use the melodic minor, which changes the notes that's used, whether we're ascending or descending, or we could switch from A minor to A harmonic minor, which has a G sharp instead of a G. When we're playing the C chord, we've got the G note. If we play G sharp with that, we get this really awkward tension that happens in the music, and that is not something that I necessarily advise until you know how to use it. Equally, when we go from the C major to the E major, we've got the G sharp instead of the G. So if we stay on the G note when we're playing E major, we got a similar type of tension that we really just want to avoid. So now I'm going to give you two examples. The first example, I'm going to play A minor, and for the third chord on the E, I'm going to play A harmonic minor, okay? And I'm going to really try and highlight where the harmonic movement is happening so that you can see clearly why I've chosen these scales. Then I'm going to play you an example in A melodic minor. Now the whole solo is going to be in A melodic minor because A melodic minor frees me up to use any of those notes. Great. So I hope this has outlined that there are so many options that you have. All you need to do is look at the content of the chords that exist in the piece and then say, what can I do with that? And one thing that I haven't mentioned yet is, let's say we've got A minor. We can use all the modes in that scale. If we know that A minor works, then all of those are open. Really, if you're playing around with this idea, you're limited by your imagination and your ability to get what you imagine onto your fretboard. Now, I'm actually going to take a step back in complexity here because this next one, I'm just going to follow the changes and really try and outline the harmonic movement with a few notes interjected in there. So with this one, I'm literally just outlining the chords. I'm outlining the notes A, C, and E for the first chord, C, E, and G for the second chord, and E, G sharp, and B for the third chord. A few notes added in there. Just see how easy this is to get a really melodic, beautiful sound out of. If you listen to a Judas Priest solo versus a Metallica solo, Judas Priest tend to use this technique a lot more than other people in metal. What it does is it allows for really beautiful melodic ideas that progress through a piece of music. Metallica mostly just stick somewhere between pentatonic and minor. And if you listen to the two solos separately, you will understand what I mean very quickly. And I am pretty confident that you can just pick two random solos from either band and you'll get an idea that one's very melodic and very, it has a lot of intention and beauty to it, and the other one is just kind of shredding. And so this does not have to be complicated even though I'm thinking about individual notes as I'm playing. I know with A minor, I've got A, C, and E. So when that chord's playing, I'm gonna aim for those notes, and then as C's approaching, I'm gonna try and work my way towards C. For example, if the C chord's coming up, I can hit A, use the bridging note B, and then play C when C starts. Okay, this stuff's really simple. When you're on C, you want to use the notes C, E, and G. Once again, you play around with that. So next, I'm going to let the chords dictate what scale. This can be incredibly dry, and a lot of people misunderstand this. So I'm going to give you an example that I think is pretty horrible, right? This is taking the chord, so A minor, over A minor, you play the scale A minor without regard to what came before and what comes after. As soon as we get to C major, we're going to play C major. As soon as we get to E major, we're going to play E major, right? This is a very common idea, and all that needs to change is the reference to the previous and the following chords, and then you can change the modes around of the scales that you're playing to lead into the next chord better. So here's the next example. So you see how that created a very incoherent solo. It was like, here's a structured idea followed by a structured idea followed by a structured idea, and none of it mashed together, right? We want this mashing together. This is where it becomes really complicated, and once again, it's limited by your imagination and your ability to put these together. What I've done in this last section is I've written a solo where I'm really trying to be complicated and try to move through just a whole bunch of different scales and things. But all of these scales make sense in context. And this really comes from just being a little bit selective. Just going, no, I'm not going to use some whacked out scale for this one chord unless I can make it make sense for the whole passage. And that's pretty much it, is just being intentional, starting with something that I think sounds cool, that works, that leads into the next chord. With the stuff over the next chord, I allow it to lead into the next chord. And in that process, make things sound as interesting or simple or complicated or whatever as I want them to sound, so long as I'm allowing it to work with the music. Now, realistically, with that last solo, I've just opened Pandora's box for you, because there are so many unlimited options that you can do literally anything you want. To summarize this entire video, start simple. Start with pentatonic. When pentatonic is too easy, move on to something more complicated. Learn it over the fretboard. Learn your scales. Learn this. Find exotic things. See how to work them into your solos. Sometimes, like in this last solo that I did, I chose pentatonic because I wanted to. It sounds good. That's it for me this week. If you have any requests like this, once again, leave a comment, send an email. Like it if you liked it, if you learned something. Subscribe if you haven't, because you're an absolutely amazing person. And I shall see you next week. Bye.